Hello, everyone. Welcome to theCUBE Pod, episode 87. I'm Furrier and Vellante for our weekly pod. Dave, salute to you. Happy New Year. It's been, we missed 2 Fridays in a row. I think we might have missed slacking big time. Been a break. With the holiday, Christmas holiday falling on a Tuesday, really kind of broke the week up with New Year's Eve that next week. It was like basically a 2-week hiatus. It was really good. No one was really in meetings. Great to take the time off. I was grinding, from Thanksgiving on with a reInvent, and we had all those NYSE events. Just end of the year, it's just the grind. Great to have that time off. It was awesome. Total refresh. Hit out of the gate in 2025. We got I'm going to New York on Sunday for NRF. So again, boom, right, kicking off the 2025 year. CES was a slog. I popped in for some meetings and a lot of good private one-on-ones. Savannah and Rob Strechay were there. I got some great information. Didn't do a lot of interviewing because it's just too busy picking up all these puzzle pieces. NVIDIA's keynote, we're going to go deep into that. I want to talk to you about your conversations around Intel, what's going on in the semis, AMD, NVIDIA, networking, Broadcom. I mean, you name it. There's so much action going on in AI infrastructure. So I want to get into that. But first, we cannot not talk about what's going on in LA. It is absolutely chaos. It's like a bomb went off. It's like the city of Boston burning down. I mean, it's brutal. Massive. And the insurance company's backing out. It's devastation. And if you've ever been to Pacific Palisades, it's gorgeous, right? It's like one of the most elite areas. It's right there on the beach, overlooking the water. My friend had a wedding there, reception, whole thing. Just great people living up there. A lot of Amazonians I know we've worked with are based around that whole Hermosa Beach area and Manhattan Beach and up in Pacific Palisades. It's just gorgeous. And that whole area from Malibu, Pacific Palisades, just gorgeous, but devastated. Towns gone, schools, churches, you name it. Everything's burnt to the ground. And they don't even know who's in there. But people literally had 8 minutes to get things. Some people didn't have any time. 100-mile-an-hour, basically firestorm winds. I saw on the news, one of the fire guys was like, it's like a chimney sideways, just blowing fire everywhere. And embers the size of 2x6s flying around the air.
We haven't seen any smoke on the East Coast. We will eventually, but you must be seeing the effects, no?
No, it's blowing. I think it's blowing. Santa Ana winds are blowing from the east, from off the desert. That's what made it so brutal. And then obviously the politics kicks in, finger pointing. But the bottom line is that, not to rant on this, or too early in the pod, but California does charge a lot of taxes. They got to take care of the fire stuff and cutting police and fire. I think certainly will get the political fever up. But
well, of course, Trump had to chime in with his nonsense, calling Gavin Newscum. He said,
"Yeah, he's going to take the show." He did not look good. Newsom, he's
I know, but why does Trump have to do that? I mean, people are dying, they're losing their homes, and he's got to chime in with his nonsense. It's like shut up and just like.
Well, I mean, they knew the winds were coming, so it was the people in LA from reporting on the ground that I've been looking at on Twitter and all throughout social media. The general vibe is not political. The general vibe is, where the hell was the warning? Then everyone in LA knows about these winds, and it was an extraordinary circumstance to get this early in the season. These winds. Normally the fires happen later in California. Right. So, fires are one of the things that they pay attention to, and this one should have been more prepared. So. I'm kind of on that camp. A little rant early.
Well,
hearts go out to everyone.
But don't be calling people names. There's just not the time for it. It's just come on.
Anyway. I mean, this is impact the tech community. I mean, my Facebook feed is full of friends in LA. I know people lost their homes, total loss. Some people had homes miraculously. Mark Schuster from Upfront Ventures, he lives in the neighborhood that got burned to the ground. His house was survived. And he kind of made a status I thought was pretty cool. He's like, hey, I'm okay, but I feel bad posting this because my house survived. And that was the general sentiment was, I mean, it's huge impact. I mean, just can't underestimate what this means. And again, a lot of tech community in LA area, um, people with no homes. I think you're going to start to see a post, housing crisis, folks stuff volunteering. So shout out to the folks in LA. Hearts out for you, but major
Brutal,
impact.
brutal.
Um, yeah, and just again, CES day was again top of the news this week. I had to basically take a few hours yesterday when I got home. I couldn't do anything. I was just burnt out. Just a lot of action this year. CES. I've been covering it 20 years, 8 years straight, going back to 2004, and then from the SiliconANGLE perch. I avoided CES in the past mainly because it's end of the year for us, but we covered on SiliconANGLE and Spades. Um, and it's the same old show every year. The smart home, the smart car, bigger TVs, gadgets, all kinds of things you can possibly imagine. Everything. This year with the AI movement, you're starting to see those things become reality. And I think, there was some people like really put off by the whole robot theme, and Jensen doubled down on that big time in his keynote. Nvidia really stole the show, in my opinion.
Totally.
And the AI is just going to absolutely make what was fantasy real. So I think you're going to start to see the consumer electronics people, powered by the chips by Broadcom, by Qualcomm, AMD, Nvidia. They're all going to win here, and even Intel has a place here. So I think CES is going to be a show that's actually going to be back on the roster for us. Because of that impact of the cloud backends, even retail next week at NRF in New York City, a retail industry show, but it's basically going to be an AI show about how AI back office technologies are going to enable new user experiences. I had a briefing with Cisco today. They're going to do a very cool thing with some folks I can't talk about right now, but next week we'll have stories on it. Big phone manufacturer we all know doing some stuff. I won't say the name of the company. I'm holding up my phone with some big brands, just doing more self-service. Of course, Amazon's got just walkout retail. I mean, I think retails and healthcare, these kinds of service industries, absolutely going to be lifted up with AI. So I think that was consistent in CES this year. And again, you saw Jensen's keynote, absolutely awesome. The guy's throwing haymakers like it's nobody's business, calling IT the HR for agents. He's put the wet blanket on quantum. Stocks were down
20
the next
years
day.
he's had 20 years out.
Remember, he said that to us and when we had
He
that
said,
briefing. Remember?
in that briefing, he said, there's nothing you can do with quantum that you can't do with AI. He said, except cryptography. And then at CES, he said it's 20 years before you'll see any utility out of quantum. You remember we heard Arvind last November when we were at the analyst event saying it's like 4 to 5 years before you'll see utility. So wow, what a delta. I tweeted, I wonder what Arvind thinks about this.
Arvind, CEO of IBM, totally has a different perspective. I mean, this is going to come in my rant section, but since we've been ranting already on some of the other things, I think Jensen's taking liberties. I mean, he's definitely knows he's got the attention. NVIDIA's just got so much innovation right now. That really it's putting on a show. Their keynotes are very Steve Jobs-like in its impact, in the sense that they move the market, highly innovative. They're ahead of the curve, and the question is, and if you put your poker face on, you think, is he really holding pocket aces right there? I mean, he is always like got a card up his sleeve, doesn't he, Dave? He's always got something good, and I think he's storyboarding this. I think he's got more stuff going on. So, we've always had that conversation here on the pod about the moat, and I've tried to take the other side, but I'm kind of coming back to, your view, which is maybe it is 10 years that they have a moat.
I think it might be more.
It's certainly very Intel-like in who they've essentially replaced. And remember, CES was always Intel was the keynote, always a big keynote, Intel presence. Now that's NVIDIA. NVIDIA swapped out Intel on the S&P. So in the
You know,
markets. So
you,
Nvidia is the new king.
but you know what, too? NVIDIA's like Wintel. And that's really the difference here. They've got the Aaron Levy tweet. I liked it. You chimed in on it. He said that vertical integration is a real, lever. I forget exactly what he said, but it's a real competitive advantage. You said spot on. I chimed in and said, well, it depends on where in the stack you are. If you're up the stack like Tesla and Apple and Oracle and Nvidia, you really can leverage that vertical integration. If you're Intel and you're stuck with Foundry, that vertical integration ain't playing out so well. But the point is that Nvidia has both the hardware that Intel had, the dominance, and it's got the software, the operating system. Remember, Microsoft's dominance started with the operating system, and that's what CUDA is. And obviously, there's more to it than CUDA. I mean, we saw that really on display with NIMS and NEMO and Omniverse and Cosmos and all the tooling. And that's a full software stack. And then he's pointing it in these new markets like, robotics and industry and factories and digital twins. And so I think it's at least 10 years, unless, there's risks to that. Taiwan, TSMC, China, maybe AI is one big fraud, but I don't think so. Yeah, I think TSM is a big risk. That's the big one. But if TSM can still provide chips to Nvidia, I think it's got a 10, 15, maybe even a 20-year runway.
Their estimates beat in their earnings. They just had their results. TSM, New York Stock Exchange listed company, just really kind of crushing it. And again, there's no game in town besides them, in my opinion. They're really dominating. They handily beat the market in the their fourth quarter. So, I mean,
I'll give you some stats.
Yeah.
I got some Floyer stats from Floyer and I just did a breaking analysis on this. And Jensen's always talking about $1 trillion market, so we wanted to test and see, all right, well, is it really $1 trillion market? So remember, the data center market used to be lucky to grow at single digits, and it even declined. It compressed in 2020 because of COVID. But if you look at the data center market and you forecast it out, this is all data center spending. So it's power, it's cooling, it's compute, storage, networking, the whole kit and caboodle. It's about $350 billion today. And by Floyer's forecast and theCUBE research, going to hit $1 trillion by 2032. And Jensen's always talking about this $1 trillion shift. So if you look at the AI, what he calls accelerated computing or extreme, parallel processing, goes from 8% of the market in 2020. It was, barely visible, single digits. It's nearly 90% by the end of the decade. So it's completely taking over the data center. And NVIDIA today, if you take all data center spend, like everything, power, cooling, facilities, compute, storage, networking, NVIDIA has about 25% of that spend today, and that's going to hold up on a market that's growing at a 15% a year CAGR. So I've seen estimates that NVIDIA could be a company with revenues between 600 million and 2 trillion. I mean, I don't know. That's pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, if the market expands, they're going to take a lot of that rent. I mean,
yeah.
If it doesn't, then that's a whole different set of consequences. I mean, we'll see. I mean, that demand curve not yet reliable. We'll see. But clearly,
well, I mean, it certainly played out in 2024. The market grew from 222 billion to 350 billion in 2024. And so, I mean, just a massive spike. So the AI, what he calls accelerated computing, went from like 40 billion last year to 180 billion in 2024. And it's going to just keep growing. It hits $1 trillion. It's probably going to hit $1 trillion before. This is just data center. Probably hits $1 trillion, by the end of the decade, just after. So, and NVIDIA's, they're at the heart of it. I mean, who's going to take NVIDIA out? It's not, everybody's all freaked out about the competition. I mean, I love Broadcom. Broadcom's not
AMD, open systems.
No, it won't. Let me just address Broadcom first. So Broadcom love Broadcom. It's not really a direct competitor to Nvidia,
Mm.
although it is indirect in the sense that it does custom silicon
If
for other
NVIDIA's
players.
if NVIDIA networking is in the stack,
Yeah,
AM.
but so here's the thing. Imagine the whole networking stack goes to Ethernet. Nvidia still has its moat because it's got the hardware and the software integration. So great, run it
Yeah.
on Ethernet.
And
That's no
Your
problem.
Wintel comment was awesome. I think that resonates with me. Wintel, for the folks who doesn't know
And
what that
and
means.
and and,
It
and
means Windows and Intel, which was the dominant players in PC revolution. So the combination of Windows, the operating system that ran on the PCs, and the PCs were powered by the Intel processor, made the computer industry and the personal computer industry, and was the real driver behind the migration of mini computers, which was the dominant form factor, mainframes and mini computers that had proprietary operating systems that ran only their apps. So Wintel represented an open standard controlled by two vendors, Windows, Microsoft Windows, and Intel semiconductors and processors, and then an
and
ecosystem around it. So
and
that was
and
a stack that worked.
and
NVIDIA,
CUDA.
NVIDIA, okay, is essentially a one company approach. So the question is, even with Open Ethernet, if the market vertically integrates, to Levy's point, then you have not only vertical integration at the lower end of the stack from the chips to the OS, but all the way to the application. So for example, NVIDIA's NIMs and all their CUDA abstractions are going to enable certain apps that run great on NVIDIA. So that looks more like a mini computer and a mainframe to me, and the pricing of these systems are in that same range. And if you remember, Dave, because you're a historian too, those days were dominated by the vendor wars. IBM had proprietary NOSes, call them proprietary because pre-open, but it was different. You had a different thing for IBM machines. You had a different one for Digital Equipment Corporation, different one for Prime, Data General, a different one for the other guys, HPE. So every software company had to build their own apps for every single one of them. So if NVIDIA takes it down that road, yeah, they'll have a moat, but their competitive advantage would be based on pure vertical integration of NVIDIA-enabled apps. That's
Here's
going
the
to be the
difference.
question.
Here's the difference.
All right, explain.
Wintel won. Intel and Microsoft won. Why? Because it really wasn't an open standard. Those were both proprietary standards. The x86 was owned by Intel and Windows was owned by Microsoft, but it became the developer standard. And the number one developer platform right now is CUDA and all the libraries. I mean, NVIDIA has over 400 libraries, AI libraries, that are optimized. And CUDA is optimized to take advantage of all of its hardware. So it's got the developer affinity. And that's where the analogy, I think, holds with Wintel because it had the developer volume. So
Yeah,
that's going to be the key to watch.
Yeah, and that's the key. That's the key. And if developers have to develop for multiple platforms, this is why the Wintel worked, because it was a general purpose architecture, again, controlled by the two companies. Again, you could say oligopoly, whatever you want to call it. But it was open for everyone. That is dominance. That's a moat. And by
What do
the
you
way,
mean by so? How is NVIDIA different? NVIDIA's open to everyone. Everybody's writing to NVIDIA.
yeah, but then you had years of people trying to compete with Intel. You had years. You look at the Mac. Mac was completely different architecture. Okay, apps on Mac were a lot different. Certainly there wasn't Office on Mac for a long time, right? So you remember Microsoft Office was the application suite which got them into hot water with the Department of Justice. I mean, Microsoft was just a startup, and then when they launched their software apps, Word, Excel, and then they had Access Database, so you had the core suite, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. When they bundled that as Microsoft Office in the late '80s, that became truly the lock spec. That was the moat. So they controlled the operating system software, called the system software, and they controlled the application software.
But the OS was the key. That was
you
the
could still
foot in
run
the-
Lotus on top
but the-
of
but
on
the-
Windows. But remember, the joke inside Microsoft at the time was, "Job's not done until Lotus doesn't run."
Yeah, right. But,
You
but
always
the
had these
operating
bugs in the middle of
system,
a spreadsheet that would just blow up. You're like,
but
screw
the
this.
OS gave them the foot in the monopoly door. That was the starting point. And
That
that
was
was
the starting
again
point.
because it was IBM MVS, the IBM operating system for
CPM,
mainframes.
CPM. I mean, again,
Oh,
Word.
no, wait. No, IBM had the hardware and the software monopoly with mainframes.
Oh
They
yeah,
had,
yes.
right,
Proprietary network operating systems. Remember, SNA.
and then that went to Intel in the form of microprocessor and Microsoft in the form of operating system. What I'm saying is that's the similar analogy to Nvidia, the CUDA being the operating system and all the other supporting tooling. And it's open in the sense that, they're not,
I mean, what does
they're
that
not
even mean?
restricting.
Open.
Exactly. It means that anybody can
Okay,
use it
I would
and
say
write to it.
that if you want to pull that analogy, here's what I would say to counter that. You could argue that Digital Equipment Corporation, which some argued at that time in the mini computer days, had the best network operating system, also called NOS, called DECnet.
Yeah, but had no
DECnet,
developers.
yeah, because only works. They had developers on DEC. They had their own applications.
Yeah, they had VAX developers.
IBM had SNA, Systems Network Architecture, SNA. So SNA, DECnet, and other ones had HP had their own proprietary version too. So that got disrupted by TCP/IP and the Open Systems Interconnect, which standardized the physical layer all the way to the transport and IP layer. Okay, that enabled the applications not to care what the hardware ran on. So that spawned internetworking, that spawned compatibility, interoperability, heterogeneous computing. And so if NVIDIA keeps the standards, to your point about Ethernet, open, they can have that middle layer with CUDA. And then if they let the developers run on top, then it's a winner take all, not winner take most. They win everything. So that supports your Wintel argument because that's what it would end up becoming if they're better, and they are looking better than the other guys. Now, again, I don't count AMD out at all. I think AMD, you're a little bit bullish on AMD. I mean, bearish on AMD. I'm bullish on AMD because I think by pure gravity they get second place.
Oh, they get second place, but here's the thing about AMD. They are winning. The reason why AMD is doing so well up to, the AI wave is because they were taking share from Intel in x86, which is a declining market. And so they had to rapidly pivot to AI, and they will get there. They will get a share, but unfortunately, Nvidia is not fumbling the way that Intel has fumbled. Nvidia looks a lot like Intel in the early 1990s than Intel in the 2020s.
Oh,
And
absolutely agree. I would say
and
even
so
late 80s. I mean,
right.
Intel from 1988 roughly, when they had the 8088 processor roughly around that time frame, all the way through the Pentiums that they had, was absolute dominance, right?
And you wanted Intel inside. You always wanted Intel inside. And developers wrote to Intel because it was you remember back then it was. I remember the journalists would say to Bill Gates when they interviewed him, "What's your favorite PC?" "Oh, the IBM so and so with the Pentium 4 or whatever it was." That was the conversation. It was so stupid. But it's in a similar way now. Developers want to write to NVIDIA, and this is a big conversation. So Dylan Patel said that Trainium was the Amazon Basic of GPUs, and then he said, which is kind of negative, but he said it's really cheap. And it's got a lot of memory, so there'll be workloads that it can capture. So that's cool. Yeah. But the highest end, it's not as good as NVIDIA is basically what he said, but it's cheap.
Yeah, and if you remember Intel, if you remember Microsoft at the time, you mentioned Gates. I remember many other quotes too. But if you look at what happened with Gates, he loved when Intel added more processors because they could do more with the software. Because as they were adding more capability, if you had an older PC and they rolled out the new version of Windows, you got more horsepower, more capability that required more processors. So that flywheel of innovation, but the backwards compatibility was still there. You can still run Windows on multiple things. You just had less functionality and it ran slower. And that really forced an accelerated product cycle turn. So more PCs were sold. If you remember back in the day, Dave, you were at IDC, you know this because you were there. They tracked shipments and units. So I think NVIDIA is not in an exact same situation, but I think when you get to the workload side of things, you're going to start looking at workloads on NVIDIA. I think the units shipped that will be the tell sign will be how many workloads are running on NVIDIA. That will also tell you how many developers are developing on top of NVIDIA. So again, I'm not, dissing NVIDIA. I think they're the darling. In fact, they stole the show at CES. And if you look at the silicon stories, there were many silicon angles, so to speak, on this CES. And NVIDIA is clearly ahead. Okay, the question is, what happens to the market? Does it compute fill in? Is there now new architectures? Does AI behave differently? What's the true bet on the AI consumption side vis-a-vis the preferred architecture to make it happen? Which is why we're looking at an AI lab in New York City and California, because benchmarks, no one knows even what to buy. I think, and you and I talked about this, off camera many times around how the Dells, the HPs of the world have an opportunity. Because if they don't enable AI factories right now, it's now or never. Because the cloud will roll them over. They will just dominate. So, this on-premise movement is hot right now. The question is, and this is what everyone's asking, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Dave, is the on-premise computing paradigm of private cloud sustainable, viable, attainable for these hardware manufacturers, these neo clouds, to get a position?
So, the data shows, our survey data, our survey partner ETR shows that 15% of the customers, and we're talking about, surveys of close to 2,000 customers, so pretty representative. About 15% are moving workloads, repatriating, specifically is the way the question was asked, repatriating workloads on-prem. Does it mean they're leaving the cloud? It means they're moving some workloads back on-prem. So that means 85% aren't. So it's number one. So the cloud continues to outpace. So, but repatriation there's pockets happening. I think the second point is, as it pertains to AI, it's true that a lot of people don't want to put certain workloads for their AI in the cloud. The problem is the tooling and the software and the ease of experimentation and all that great stuff in the cloud doesn't really exist on-prem. The Dell AI factory is really hardware. The same with HPE solutions. I don't know as much about Lenovo, but I presume it's similar. So the ecosystem and the surrounding software for on-prem is not nearly as robust. The databases, the Snowflake and Databricks capabilities, all that, the tooling, the data movers. I mean, all that has to be built out. And I think there's about a 12 to 18 month window before the on-prem guys have to get their shit together to be able to be good enough to capture those cloud or those AI workloads, or it's going to go to the cloud just like cloud did originally. Remember originally cloud, people like, I'm not putting my stuff in the cloud. Mm-hmm. And now everybody puts their stuff in the cloud and they run virtual private networks and so forth. But so I think it's about a 12 to 18 month window for them being Dell, HPE, Lenovo, IBM, the on-prem guys. Oracle's a little different. You can explain that if you're interested, to fill that gap. Oracle's different because they have a cloud. And so they have that advantage, and they have the same experience. So they've got a little bit of an advantage there. But I would say for Dell, HPE, and Lenovo, they got gaps to fill if the power law of Gen AI is going to prove true on-prem.
There's so many good stories. I mean, the agents are really a rocking story. Even Axios, I'm reading an article on Axios right now. They had a post, and I'll pivot to agents in a second, but they were reporting that the headline is "One Big Thing: $600 million supercomputer." So the world's most powerful supercomputer was officially dedicated in California yesterday, with CEOs of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Antonio Neri, and Lisa Xu of AMD. Called El Capitan. $700 million supercomputing will handle only classified tasks, securing the nuclear weapons and other critical infrastructure and government activities. It sits in Lawrence Livermore National Labs, which is right in my neighborhood in the Valley. And I bring this up because, again, back to the mainframe conversation, you're starting to see mainframes coming back. I think the idea of a mainframe in a modern era is a great conversation. And I think it's one we're going to have a lot this year. The mainframes used to be big iron, they called it, sit in a glass house glass house, meaning a room that had air conditioning because the drives were so big. And I think the supercomputing that you're seeing with HPE and AMD, and certainly the Nvidia stuff and the Dell AI factories, these are systems that are cost a lot. To do these GPUs and these systems that are configured and developed or architected are going to have so much system architecture to it, how many GPUs, certain amount of compute, system software to run it all, whether it's CUDA or a mixed stack of software, open and proprietary or open and vendor specific. They're massive, Dave. So this shows me that the arms race is on for the big gear, the big iron. We're in a modern era of big iron compute, mainframe-like capability. And what I love about Nvidia again, and I think this is why I think they got some cards up their sleeve, is Jensen's pattern is he's almost playing with everybody. You can see him almost, smiling with these like smirks because he knows what's coming. And maybe that's me just kind of reading the tea leaves, but he's ahead of the curve by so many years because this is kind of time to kind of flaunt. He's almost too boastful, and it makes me nervous a little bit in a good way. Like, okay, he's got more there. I can sense there's a lot more coming. I think Nvidia is there. And when he met with us last year at GTC, remember what he said? One of the most simple lines he said, we're in the era of democratizing supercomputing for the masses. And that's what's happening. You're starting to see what was once a very unique thing like this HPE AMD supercomputer at Lawrence Livermore was only restricted for the biggest, most powerful organizations that had the biggest budgets, the biggest facilities. He was showing stuff at CES that you could hold in your hand.
Unbelievable. The supercomputer in your hand, the handheld supercomputer.
Handheld supercomputer.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. So this is why I'm saying he's kind of coy in these comments, but he's got a spring to his step. He's hiding the big act, the big reveal. And remember, Steve Jobs always used to say, one more thing. Jensen's the proverbial one more thing. I mean, every keynote, he's got something original, right? So it's just like some companies will milk something for years, right, and pound it. But Jensen's got something original every single time. And that's what I think people who aren't in the industry don't understand is that he has the juice. He has the market-making capabilities by just flaunting his stuff. The products, the innovation, and again, it was all on display at CES. And again, it was one of the better keynotes he's done, just from a pure mic drop standpoint.
I've never seen an executive like this. I mean, even Jobs would always have something new to say, but he wasn't out there as much as Jensen. Jobs was like the mystery man, I mean, you interviewed him back in the PodTech days, and maybe he was more available back then, but Jensen's, like every week, Jensen does an interview or some other speech, and every time he speaks, he introduces something new. And most CEOs, I mean, they're very good communicators, but most of them are kind of taking the same narrative, recycling it or repeating it, sometimes verbatim, over and over, which is not a bad thing because repetition is good and it helps educate. But Jensen is like holds a master class in computer science every time he speaks. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome.
I started to read that book, The Nvidia Way. It had some people criticized it, but one of the things it says in the book is that he like lives by the whiteboard. He'll like stand up and he'll start going deep on the whiteboard. And his people call him Professor Jensen or something. It's like the guy's got such serious chops you can see around corners.
Yeah, that's awesome. The other stuff going on AI in the AI world, Anthropic reportedly raising $2 billion. Again, another
$60 billion valuation now, right?
Yeah, I mean that's on the heels of Databricks.
So Anthropic worth as much as Databricks? Does that make sense to you? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it's got to be something related to AWS, either costs or just overall more R&D. But I mean,
Databricks a $3 billion company, I'm guessing, north of $2 billion, right? I mean, with proven business model.
Hey, don't pull the nets up when the fish are running. That's the old expression. When the fish are running,
True.
keep the nets out there. Drag that net and get as much cash as you can. It's frothy, and the rich are getting richer, and I think there's going to be a real bubble pop for the haves and have-nots in AI right now. You're going to see this year. I think this is going to be the year of AI infrastructure, clearly another year. I think you're going to start to see a lot of the solidification of AI infrastructure architectures that's consumable or buyable, meaning I think the Dell's on the right track. I think AMD's going to up their game. NVIDIA's already there. You're going to start to see people get the AI. Once that pops into place, you're going to know who the real producers of AI are and who the consumers are. So, for example, I was just in Vegas. IBM had a private tour of the UFC Performance Center with the MMA fighters train, fully very interdisciplinary, full train. It's like Equinox Gym for MMA fighters, perfectly designed for performance. They had everything. Tom Brady visits there all the time. It's all the alpha athletes. And what was interesting to me, Dave, is that when you look at what they're doing there, the technology involved in helping these guys get better is amazing. So, here you got sports, you got all kinds of new applications, just really kind of changing the game. And this is where I think IBM has a partnership with them. And I bring up the UFC because the guy who's in charge of the project, UFC's got massive ratings going on. They went from a sport that was all done by insiders to now full-blown media. And I saw all the tile mastheads for all the fights on the wall there. It was really compelling. Is that they try to get, for 2 years, to build their own AI system to get insights. They couldn't do it. IBM comes in with Watson X, and this is a classic example where they have domain experience on the team at UFC, but they didn't have the AI chops. They are a consumer of AI. They are not producing AI. They're producing outcome from AI, better highlights, certain stats. Hey, if someone has 3 takedowns, he usually wins 90% of his matches. So like a StatCast kind of media play that's going on with the UFC.
Very
and
cool.
It's such a complicated sport that the AI hasn't been trained yet for weird stuff from on TV. For example, the guy said, most computer vision looks for objects. We're looking for the elbow. And by the way, whose elbow is it on the ground from the fighters when they're in the chokehold? And if the arm goes in the other direction, the computer wasn't trained to know that the arm just snapped, right? So like you don't know. So that it's really difficult with computer vision to do that right now. And so guess what? They said, we'll work with IBM. IBM is a producer of AI. UFC is a consumer of AI. So this year, this bubble pops around this criteria. The AI bubble will separate the consumers of AI who have domain expertise and data, and then separate out the real producers of AI, algorithms, auto ML, understanding all the infrastructure involved, whether you're using a company like Anyscale or producing high-end PhD level engineers. That's where it's going. I think that's why Anthropic's worth $6 billion or $60 billion, because I think they're on that side of the AI equation. I think you can have a lot of people who are straddling that we're an AI company and they're not. They're using AI. So again, really nuanced point, but you're going to have a higher valuation if you're on the producer of AI. So back to picks and shovels. Are you selling the picks and shovels, or are you the miner?
Well, it feels like this is still a pretty big gap between the picks and shovels and the application piece. Although you see companies like ServiceNow, Salesforce, seemingly, who knows though, John? They could say, "Oh, it's all from AI." It could be from traditional stuff. You just don't know. It's like I always say, a company's profits are what they say they are. Right? They can play games with the income statement. They can put things in different buckets. So, we'll see. We'll see if the application piece, is really has traction. I kind of believe ServiceNow and Salesforce are a little ahead of the game only because they saw this coming. I think they've done some of the work, but it's hard to tell. And because you see other companies that it hasn't kicked in yet. I mean, Workday, Mongo's more database, but still they announced a bunch of stuff last year at .local, and it hasn't kicked in yet in the income statement. And I think that's a function of the end markets right now. As we all know, it's the CapEx that's driving this.
Yeah.
And I think the CapEx are probably understated. They're probably going to keep spending. At some point, it's got to either pay back or people are going to dial down. And right now, it's a race. It's like, everybody trying to get to AGI first.
The
So,
other big news that's happening, it's going pretty crazy right now, is the whole Meta and Facebook. I still call it Facebook. Meta's um, changing their fact-checking policy. Um, he's, obviously walking it back and changing it. And they're also terminating. Axios is reporting a story here. They're terminating all major DEI programs, including for hiring, training, procurement, um, citing a changed legal and policy landscape. So what you got going on here is that, and Amazon, by the way, is sending a memo out there winding down outdated programs as well. Um, the the idea that this Trump administration is coming in, all the tech people are posturing, right? They're just, you almost see them blowing with the wind on this one. So you're seeing all these policies changing, and I think this is going to a real tell sign that the tech era is leaning into, don't look at me, we're good, we're playing ball. Um, almost like neutral. They're trying to be aligning with them, but it's flip flop. So I see this being very political, Dave, in terms of the policy stuff. We'll see. Facebook and Meta, it's probably it's a problem that's so hard to solve. I mean, they had to already move people out of California, so they said, because to Texas, because they were bias built into the results.
yeah. So, I mean, this is a hard one, right? Because you had such an over rotation in the last election to whether you call it, well, it was censorship, really. It was censorship by the government, right? So that's a problem, right? And so the big tech companies were kind of caught in the middle. They had a gun to their head, take this down, don't report on that. So they're basically, and Zuckerberg's always said, hey, come up with some clear policies that we can follow, and we'll follow them. So it's almost like they're kind of washing their hands of it. Now, they're all kissing the ring. They're all donating $1 million to the inauguration, right? You're seeing that, like everybody's doing it, like Meta, Sam Altman. I think Tim Cook's doing it personally. It's unbelievable. Now, these tech companies haven't historically, made those types of donations. It's always been different industries. So maybe now tech is so ubiquitous and large that it has to, be more effective in lobbying, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I see a story that came across Yahoo Finance. Reuters has a story. HP secures $1 billion AI server deal with Elon Musk's X. Bloomberg is reporting. Interesting. Supermicro and Dell were also bidding on this deal. No comment from Hewlett Packard.
Interesting.
So
speaking of X, have you downloaded the Grok app?
Not yet. I used it on Twitter. I'm X, but I haven't used it on the app yet.
It's great.
Yeah, you
it's
used
really
it. I
good.
saw your tweet. Tell me about it.
So I ran, the breaking analysis this week was really trying to connect the dots on Nvidia's moat and really trying to deeply understand its software architecture and its entire integrated system. And so, I think I watched Jensen's keynotes like 3 times, and he goes so fast, and like half the like, what is that again? Hit replay. And so, and you combine that with everything we've been learning throughout the years, and GTC on. And so I said, all right, let me just kind of use AI to try to put this stuff together, understand what it is, how it works, how it connects, how it feeds into end markets. And so I ran tests on GPT 01, 04, Grok, Gemini, and Perplexity. And I think Grok gave me the best answers, the most cogent, the less diversions. I mean, they were all pretty good. But I ended up using the Grok stuff more. And when I fact check it, because you got to fact check all this stuff. When I fact check it, I found that the Grok narrative was cleaner, easier to understand, and more accurate. Now, that's just for that one use case. I don't know how it does on the Turing test. I have no idea. or hard math problems. But for my particular situation, it was it was the most helpful. Now, it didn't save me any time because I wasted a lot of time testing all these systems. But going forward, the problem with these LLMs is, you get great results on one, like I just did with Grok, about great, but very, very good. And then you start using them, you start relying on them, and then all of a sudden they wilt, and you got to go to another one. So it's sort of counterproductive in that sense, even though LLMs make us all more productive. But I'm looking forward to the day where we can really rely on, one for one particular use case, and another one to make charts, another one to make graphs, right? I mean, the graph capability of Llama used to be great, and now I find other systems, whether it's Dolly or others, and so it's kind of frustrating, frankly, as a user, because things are changing so fast. I don't know what you're finding.
Well, when I used it, it was a little bit, a lot of hallucinations, but they've been upgrading. I haven't used it in months. So to me, it was, not even viable. Perplexity, I think, is the best answer engine out there right now. ChatGPT is good. Anthropic's good, on the LLMs that I'm using. But I'm going to give Grok a try. I mean, I'll check it out. Sure.
What I like about it is there seems to be less politically correct guardrails on it. Like in our family, we have a pug, and we're obsessed with the pug, right? And we have, half the family, maybe not half, but certain members of the family are MAGA, others are anti-MAGA. I'm kind of down the middle, as you know. So I tried to put the pug in a MAGA hat, and most LLMs wouldn't let me. And this is during the election. We were like going back and forth in the family text, just breaking each other's chops. And Grok was happy to put my pug in a MAGA hat, but the others were like, "Oh no, we can't do that," and or would crap out, say, "Oh, there was a problem," or "Oh, that's outside of our abilities." And Grok was like, "Sure, here you go." So that was kind of cool, and I do find that it's a lot less politically correct. Now, the flip side of that is I wonder what guardrails it doesn't have, where you really need guardrails. So that could be a real exposure for users.
I'm reading a story here. Jeff Bezos is no longer the richest person in the world after forgetting to shut up his EC2 instance.
That's pretty good.
It's definitely a doctored headline, but it did make me laugh. I was scrolling through it, and I was trying to look up a story, but
I have you'll like this. I have a headline of one of my slides for my breaking analysis week is "Your margin is my opportunity." It's got Nvidia in the middle and everybody attacking Nvidia. Now, I remember when Jassy said to you, I'm not sure, because you threw out that line. You said, "Yeah, I'm not sure Jeff ever said that," but it made good journalism.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that?
I do. He was debunking it almost like he was missed. Like, oh, come on, it's overplayed. Andy was great on theCUBE when he came on that reInvent day. I got to say, I was going to repost that story, because a lot of the stuff he said is actually being reported right now. The whole agentic is harder than it looks. Stories are hitting. You're starting to see those stories bake out now. Although, there's a lot of AI agent discussions, because as we predicted on the pod, which we're going to be right on this one, is that it's going to take time for the AI infrastructure to get better first. So, that wasn't just Andy being, pro AWS. I think it was very astute in saying it's not as easy as you think to do the AI. So I thought that was pretty clever. And, I'm trying to get Andy to come on for our kickoff at our NYSE on February 20th. We're kicking off our second set on February 20th. I guess it's a soft launch, Dave. We're gonna open up our big set at NYSE. We'll have 2 operational sets as of February 20th, and we're going to do a lot of programming out of there, not just drop-ins. So that's going to be big news. Son of a soft launch.
I wanted to just make. I love that Jassy interview, and I think I mentioned on other CUBE pods. I especially love the private conversations that we had with him. I really like Amazon's AI strategy. I think the narrative that they're behind. Maybe they were behind, but I'm not worried about them. I think they're going to do really, really well. Dylan Patel's comment that it's the Amazon basics of GPU, that Trainium is that. it sounded like a pejorative, but it wasn't. It was like, hey, it's really cost effective. Floyer is somewhat negative on Amazon, and I disagree with them. I think their strategy is really good. I think they're going to have a lot of success with alternative, lower cost. I don't think you need the highest end, Nvidia GPUs for all these workloads. I think whether it's Trainium or Google TPUs, maybe even Maya from Microsoft, if that actually ships in volume. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity there. If it's $1 trillion market, that means there's so much potential business. I don't think it's to the point where it's going to hurt Nvidia, but I really like the strategy of having an alternative running on Annapurna designed silicon that's been in the market now for 10 years. So they're up that curve. I like their position.
Yeah, I do too. I think I'm bullish on Amazon. I think
Yep.
they win in the Trump era. If you look at their stock compared to the others, I think there's some headroom there. So I'm not a stock picker, so don't take my advice. Don't sue us, but we'll still say it anyway. So I think Amazon's good. Love Apple still. I think Apple's I think these companies just get bigger, Dave. I think we're gonna be in an era where valuations, how companies go public. I think there's going to be a big IPO market this year. I still think you're going to have an active secondary, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those secondaries, those late stage fundings, become a liquidity event anyway. Because look at, I mean, Anthropic raising $2 billion at a $60 billion valuation. I mean, Dave, that's an IPO. That's
I'm
you
trying
might
to
as
get
well
my
just call it an
head
IPO.
around that. Well, I mean, look at there's the business model for LLMs, is very unclear. I think a lot of people are like, hey, just build it and they'll come. But as we've reported many times now, the scaling laws, to keep the scaling laws, to compute the data and the parameters, together, you look at the cost of training these models and you look at the cost per token coming down orders of magnitude, multiple orders of magnitude over 24 to 36 months. And it's like, it looks like a really crappy business. And so I'm sure there are business models behind it, whether it's advertising or, other kind of volume businesses and consumer businesses and enterprise businesses. I mean, so many potential opportunities. But wow, you have to have a lot of faith to put a $60 billion valuation on Anthropic. I mean, I love it, but it
Yeah.
feels a little bubblicious.
So I'm reading a story here. This is going to be interesting. The sources, according to Bloomberg, AI and Google, OpenAI and Google and other companies, probably like a Perplexity as well, are collectively paying hundreds of content creators for access to their unpublished videos to train the AI models. Interesting value in data training. So again, more AI love there. So we covered the semis. What else is going down? Oh, we got the Cyber Resilience Summit happening the 14th and 15th here in January. National Retail Foundation, NRF, Media Week for theCUBE will be there with NYSE, Wired for AI retail leaders on January 17th week. That's going to be broadcast date, and then we're going to be filming next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We're having a CMO leader event here in Palo Alto on February 10th and 11th. 2 days, maybe three. I think we're going to have 3 days, Dave, based on what I'm seeing on the inbounds. CMOs in Silicon Valley are coming into our studio to share their leadership stories and innovation strategies around how to be a CMO in this modern era. That should be great. Of course, the NYSE Wired community is growing there. And of course, in February 20th, we're going to be in New York City opening up our second set at the New York Stock Exchange. And they're having a media event for publishers, broadcasters, kind of their own version of a conference for folks. We're going to be there presenting with CNBC and others on our format. That should be fun. And then on the 21st, it looks like we haven't confirmed it yet 100%, but it's a 90+%, but partnering with John Mack with lifecalling.org, fantastic organization. You and I both talked to him and his team on, postcards for humanity. Basically, they're talking about humanization of content and digital life and how that, keeps the human spirit alive and what we as humans want to kind of align with, and what's our calling. So that organization we're going to start doing some work with, as well as some others. You're going to see a lot more programming this year, 2025. But lifecalling.org, life-calling.org.
Exciting, John. That is super exciting.
And then obviously the second set is the Buttonwood Room, named after the famous
But it's the Buttonwood Podium.
Buttonwood Podium. It's the other bell, the old bell. It's the legacy bell. But we're going to modernize it. It's going to be our big set, kind of like how Jim Cramer has a Mad Money set separate from CNBC. We'll have our own CUBE podcast, kind of mini set, pretty large set in that Buttonwood room, podium room. And then, of course, we have the balcony where CNN used to have their booth. That's now ours. And we'll do those two locations. And hopefully, the sooner we get up and running, maybe every day from Palo Alto and every day in New York. So a lot more curated content coming up, a lot more video storytelling and editorial. So we're going to see a lot of flow, multimodal flow. Should be great. Should be awesome.
Awesome. All right, I got to go.
Dave, see you next week in New York. You're coming down Monday night?
I come down Monday night.
Yep. I'll be there. Cisco's having a big event Sunday night. Bob La Liberté and I are going to be hanging out, checking out the big reveal from Cisco and retail. So we'll see you in New York.
Awesome, John. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.